Speaker, the House proceeded to consider ministerial statement, and this ministerial statement was rendered by the Minister of Health, and it was on the recruitment of over 11,000 health workers, and briefed the House on the progress made in the exercise. And we did see quite a number of members of Parliament posing follow-up questions, seeking clarity from the Minister of Health.
Thereafter, Chinsali Member of Parliament, Mr. Kalalu Mukosa, moved the private member's motion titled Register Board Members with the Institute of Directors of Zambia, that in order to enhance corporate governance, that this House urges the government to register all board members in government institutions and parastatal bodies with the Institute of Directors of Zambia. And so this motion was seconded by Lunte Member of Parliament. And so a question was put, and this motion was negatived.
There was a consideration of the National Pension Scheme Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 21 of 2022, which came up at committee stage, and bill reported without amendment, and a third reading to be considered today.
The House also considered the Zambia Institute of Secretaries Bill, National Assembly Bill number 18 of 2022, and so this bill was read the third time, and it passed.
Thereafter, the House did resolve into Committee of Supply to consider estimates of revenue and expenditure, including capital and constitutional and statutory expenditure, and quite a number of heads that were considered yesterday. Head 26, which is Ministry of Information and Media, a total mounting to 122,986,919 was ordered to stand as part of the estimates.
The House also considered Head 78, the Zambia Security Intelligence Services, and so this head was agreed to stand part of the estimates, and the approved budget allocation for this particular head is 1,386,104,046 kwacha.
The last head, which was considered yesterday, was Head 35, Ministry of Small and Medium Enterprise, and at the time business was interrupted, this head was under consideration, and it being 1910, the chairperson interrupted the proceedings, and committee work stood adjourned. It was Mr. Sanjay Chanda who was on the floor of the House debating this head. So when this head comes up for consideration, he'll continue debating, and the House adjourned at 19:14 hours. So Matimba, that's the business that was considered on the floor of the House yesterday. Let's shift our attention and quickly look at what is expected to be considered on the floor of the House shortly, to be able to see the presiding officer's proceedings making the way to the chamber. We do have one question for Olo answer, understanding order 74, and this question is question 96, which will come from Kanyama Member of Parliament, Mr. Chinkuli, and it's directed to the Minister of Finance and National Planning. And we have 3 bills that are coming at various stages, and a total number of 4 heads. For now, we cross over to the floor of the House for the commencement of today's business.
Madam Speaker.
Tendency of Zambia, proud and free, land of wealth and joy in unity, victors in the struggle for our rights. We want freedom's fight for one, strong and free. Africa is our own motherland, fashioned with
Almighty God, who in your infinite wisdom and providential goodness has appointed the offices of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people. We beseech you to consider with your abundant favor us, your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of such important responsibilities in this land. Let your blessing descend upon us here in Parliament assembled, and grant that we may, as in your presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and a faithful manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. Amen. Honorable members, I have two announcements to make. The first one is to the effect that I wish to inform the House that the SADC Parliamentary Forum has organized meetings of its standing committees scheduled to take place from tomorrow, Friday, 25th November to Monday, 28th November 2022. The meetings will be held virtually from 09 hours to 16:30 hours on each day. In this regard, honorable members, especially those who are not members of the SADC PF standing committees, are urged to attend the meetings. In order to attend, honorable members are required to register online and in advance. Registration details and schedule of programming will be communicated to all honorable members by the office of the clerk. I thank you. The second announcement is that the House will recall that on Tuesday, 22nd November 2022, I directed the Honorable Minister of Technology and Science to render a ministerial statement on the failure by farmers to access farming inputs due to inactive SIM cards. The directive followed a matter of urgent public importance raised by the Honorable Member Mr. Y. Mutayachalo, Member of Parliament for Chama North Parliamentary Constituency. The ministerial statement was scheduled for today, Thursday, 24th November 2022. However, the statement will be issued on Tuesday, 29th November 2022. I thank you. There is one matter for urgent public importance. This will be done by the Honorable Member for Petauke Central. What is the matter, Honorable Member for Petauke?
Yes, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving the good people of Petauke this opportunity to raise the matter of urgent public importance. Madam Speaker, in Petauke Central constituency, we received the CDF funds for 2021 last year, September, and this year we received the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and we approved to work on the community schools which were approved, which were upgraded to primary schools, about 46, Madam Speaker. But today, it started raining in Petauke in the morning, and the pupils in these community schools, which we haven't yet started constructing them because of the bureaucracy surrounding the CDF. The tree, because of strong wind and rainfall, it had fallen and it almost killed the teacher and pupils who are learning under the tree. Madam Speaker, I seek your guidance, and this matter is directed to the Minister of Local Government. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Order, order. Order, honorable members, we have a lot of work today. Honorable member for Petauke, your matter is not admitted. You are advised to liaise with the Honorable Minister of Local Government and Rural Development. In the meantime, I would urge you to get in touch with our journals department just to help you understand this issue so that you don't appear like I'm just rejecting your matters of urgent public importance. Thank you. Question for oral answer, understanding order 74. The Honorable Member for Kanyama.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 96.
The Honorable Minister of Finance and National Planning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honorable Chinkoli asks the following questions. A, whether there's any money in the sinking fund account that was opened for redeeming the Eurobonds. And B, if there's no money in the account, why? Madam Speaker, the response is as follows. The government of the Republic of Zambia set up a sinking fund in 2015 for the purpose of financing the repayment or redemption or purchase before maturity of the 3 Eurobonds that attain maturity in 2022, 2024, and 2027, with the corresponding commercial debts of $750 million US dollars, $1 billion US dollars, and $1.25 billion US dollars, respectively. Since May 2018, the government has been setting aside financial resources towards the accumulation of funds in the sinking fund for the exclusive purpose of retiring the commercial debt by the maturity dates. Madam Speaker, as of 15th of October 2022, the balance in the sinking fund was $10,380,405.22. Due to the constrained financial envelope, government has not been able to accumulate sufficient funds in the sinking fund account. Funds in the sinking fund account have not been utilized because of the ongoing debt service standstill on non-multilateral debt obligations, including Eurobond holders, after finalization of the debt restructuring agreement with respective creditors. Madam Speaker, I wish to thank you.
Supplementary questions. The Honorable Member for Zambezi East.
Madam Speaker, it is indeed a very sad story to hear that we have struggled really to put funds in that sinking fund, exposing us to a situation where the Eurobond, which matured in 2022, is still outstanding and we are supposed to pay. What I want to find out from the Honorable Minister of Finance and National Planning is to whether we are now up to date in terms of coupon payments and what will happen to the principal that fell due this year. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Minister of Finance and National Planning.
I thank you, Madam Speaker. We have not been paying the coupon payments. That is alternatively understood. That is something like the interest payment, but the technical terminology is coupon payments. We have not been servicing those. And similarly, when this became due, we did not pay. The reason for that is once it had been discovered that Zambia was debt unsustainable, debt-ridden, as part of the process towards debt relief, there was an agreement that was made at international level for a so-called debt standstill, debt service standstill. Debt service standstill simply means that you do not service the debt except those owed to multilateral institutions. These other debts will only be serviced once we get to the point where the debt of Zambia has been restructured, agreed with the creditors, and then the remnants of that debt now gets serviced. So for now, no debt service on this type of debt, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Kanyama, is your question. Do you have any supplementary question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You agree with me that this account was, opened for a particular purpose, and being in a public domain, it's just fair that, the people of Zambia know what is in that account. And because of that, I would want to hear from the minister if at all this account is serving its intended purpose. Thank you.
The Honorable Minister of Finance and National Planning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I could liken this to somebody who goes to borrow money to buy a car, say Mercedes-Benz, on terms. And the terms would be something like every month you must pay 40,000 kwacha towards the redemption of this debt. So every month, 40,000. But then, this debtor, instead of putting aside 40,000 kwacha every month, they are putting aside, say, 1,000 kwacha. Clearly, therefore, that kind of payment, that kind of financial provision, right from the very start, there was no seriousness. There was no seriousness into making financial provisions to be able to service this debt. Because how do you go and borrow something like $13 billion, then you say every year, or up to the time when problems emerge, you've only put $10 million on the side. You borrowed billions and billions, but you've only put 10 million. This is like what I'm saying now. It's like putting aside 1,000 kwacha when you should be putting 40,000 kwacha. So there was no seriousness. And this was just a cosmetic measure to try and create an impression that something was being done in preparation of the debt. Madam Speaker, thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Nkana.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm not sure I have heard the exact amount that is in that account, because it looks like the minister is skating around that issue. My question, however, is since the sinking fund is a national undertaking, and the new government has inherited that initiative. Do we see government continuing in the same path to sustain this fund? And if so, because I'm not sure in the last two budgets that the minister has presented have had any allocations that has been made to this particular fund, and from where we are going to be saving funds towards this sinking fund. Is the new government abandoning this initiative, or are we continuing?
Honorable member, one question per honorable member. Just ask one question, not several questions. I don't know if I had 3 or more questions.
Well,
one question which you would like the minister to address.
Madam Speaker, I think the minister obviously knows, has gotten where I'm driving at. The point is, I made a sweeping statement to the effect that I didn't hear him state how much is in there, but that's not my question. Except my question is government abandoning this fund, or they're continuing with this fund? Because we haven't had any pronouncements, unless I missed that part from the two budgets. Maybe that's my question, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The Honorable Minister of Finance and National Planning.
Madam Speaker, when I read the statement, I said there's $10 million, $10.4 million in the sinking fund against outstandings, if we exclude the multilaterals, of about maybe roughly 10 billion. Yeah. Now, the substantive question is, if we abandoned this initiative to be putting aside money for the debt, I think that's your question, isn't it? The answer is that at the time when these debts were being acquired, the solution was, or the purported solution was, to be putting aside money. Where we are now, given the level of debt, this putting aside of little monies like this does not address the issue of our excessive indebtedness. The answer to the problem where we are now is what the government is already undertaking. In other words, take steps towards debt restructuring. Debt restructuring means that some of these loans may be written off, some of them may be stretched over a period of time, some of them interest rate may be lowered, or a combination of this. That is the more effective way of dealing with this excessive debt than putting aside any little amount of money that we would be making. So the real answer now, where we stand, is to get the debt to be restructured. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Ron.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you very much, Honorable Minister. My understanding is, Honorable Minister, is that this sinking fund was created in order to help liquidate the 3 Euro bonds, which are 750, 1 billion and 1.5 billion dollars. Honorable Minister, you have stated in your statement that as of 15th October 2022, there is only a paltry, I should say, $10.4 million in this account. Honorable Minister, I would want to find out from you, sir, as to what is the methodology that government is using to drop monies into this sinking fund. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Minister of Finance and National Planning.
I thank you, Madam Speaker. The answer is really what I just said a few minutes ago. Given the level of indebtedness, this serious debt that is on our shoulders, the question is, how do you resolve it? One approach which was taken was to say we'll be putting money aside so that when the debts mature, we have sufficient money or close to sufficient money to pay that. In all honesty, that was not done because the 10 million compared to billions and billions is nothing. So therefore, next question is, if the sinking fund is no longer a viable solution towards the debt repayment, what then is the viable option? The viable option, which I just described, is that of getting the debt to be restructured. To get the debt to be restructured, number one, we needed to be on the IMF program, because the IMF then will be telling the creditors that we owe money, guys, there is no way Zambia can pay you all this. So just let's negotiate on how you reduce the debt. So that is the whole purpose of the program. Once the program is in place, the issue now is to discuss with the creditors to say, do you agree to restructure the debt or no? And that was already covered. They agreed that they will restructure the debt. The next issue where we are now headed to is, what is the extent of the debt relief? That's where we are now. And as I said earlier on, this is the more viable and realistic approach to resolving the debt problem compared to putting aside the little monies. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Kankoyo.
I thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the 2022 budget, there was money allocated to pay off the 750 million euro bond. Now that we didn't pay, I want to know from the Minister of Finance, where has that money gone? I thank you.
The Honorable Minister of Finance and National Planning.
Madam Speaker, that money was put on the budget on the understanding that 750 million would come in the budget by way of borrowing. And then once you've borrowed, pay. In other words, you borrow from A to pay B. Now, to the extent that there's a debt standstill, as I indicated, where we have agreed that debt service will not be made until after debt restructuring, it means that the requirement to go and borrow from A to pay B did not arise, because B is not going to be paid. Therefore, that money was not borrowed, and therefore it was also not spent. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Lunte. And that will be the last question. We have a lot of work on the issue.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I don't know if you know, Madam Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Finance continues to mentor me. He has a lot of influence on my development. Honorable Minister of Finance, now that you have taken a different approach to maintaining the sinking fund, it has now remained as an administrative burden to the government. What are you going to, oh, sorry. I was saying, now that you have taken a different approach, which is a restructuring of debt, by the way, let me maybe thank you, because I think it will not be correct. Let me thank you, Honorable Minister, for the clarification you have made to the nation today, because it's very important that the people become
the
aware.
Honorable Member for Lunte, you are supposed to ask a supplementary
Yes,
question.
Madam Speaker.
Yes, so ask a supplementary question. If you have checked our order paper today, we have a lot of work.
Absolutely.
Please go straight to the question.
Honorable Minister of Finance, now that you have taken a different route of this debt restructuring as opposed to keeping money to pay the debt, what are you going to do to remove this administrative inconvenience by having a sinking fund which won't be useful, to take it out of your books and free the resources to be working on things that are more productive than having those numbers? Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. The Honorable Minister of Finance and National Planning.
I thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm not sure whether I would call that an administrative inconvenience because it still remains money belonging to the Republic of Zambia. And it is up to us as a nation at some point in time to decide what to do with it. For now, since it is in dollars, it constitutes part of the foreign exchange reserves for Zambia, and therefore it is available for the general use of the Bank of Zambia in case of currency interventions or something like that. It is our money. It is safe. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The clerk will now read the orders of the day.
The Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services Bill, National Assembly Bill number 22 of 2022, second reading.
The Honorable Minister of Finance and National Planning.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Any debate? The Honorable Minister of Finance and National Planning.
Madam Speaker, the introduction of the Securities Amendment Bill number 23 of 2022 is intended to align the operations of the Securities Exchange Commission (SEC) with the risk-based framework introduced under the Financial Intelligence Center Act (FIC) and ensure that the Commission effectively and efficiently undertakes its supervisory mandate. The risk-based approach to anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, and counter-proliferation financing is necessary.
The Honorable Minister, is it we are looking at the Zambia Institute of Financial and Banking and Financial Services Bill, not the Securities Bill. I don't know which one. I don't know if I heard you reading the Securities Amendment.
I apologize. I thought this is what was announced.
I announced the Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services Bill.
I apologize. I will start afresh, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the introduction of the Zambia Institute for Banking and Financial Services Bill number 22 of 2022 is intended to establish the Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services and an Act of Parliament in order to provide a legal framework for Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services as a training institution and a qualification awarding body to be registered under the Higher Education Authority and the Zambia Qualifications Authority as required by law. Madam Speaker, the Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services Bill number 22 of 2022 aims to achieve the following objectives. A, provide for the registration of banking and financial services practitioners and regulate their practice and professional conduct. B, continue the existence of the Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services and provide for its functions. C, promote the banking and financial services professions and provide. D, for matters connected with or incidental to the foregoing. Rationale of the bill. Madam Speaker, the Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services is a professional body and training institute which has been in existence for 30 years now as a society, having been registered in 1992 under the Societies Act Chapter 119 of the laws of Zambia. The institute was established with a view of providing knowledge and enhancing professionalism in the banking and financial services sector through a code of professional conduct. It is worth noting that all professionals involved in the onboarding of core banking and financial services and their professional conduct or misconduct has a direct bearing on the integrity of the financial sector and the economy at large, and therefore need to operate in a legal environment that is self-regulatory and self-financing. However, the current registration and the regulation of Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services under the Societies Act gives rise to several risks and challenges in relation to its critical role in the financial business, academic sector, and the economy as a whole. Major policy changes or inclusions in the bill. Madam Speaker, the bill will provide for a legal framework of the Institute's operations and to standardize banking and financial services practices among its members. Among the key functions, the bill provides for advancing the banking and financial services profession, as well as setting and enforcing professional standards for all practitioners. Regulating entry and setting standards. The bill provides for regulating the entry to the banking profession by determining the standards of knowledge and skill needed for a person who intends to be a member of the banking and financial services profession. The bill also provides for the setting of standards for bankers and financial services professionals by way of carrying out professional conduct examinations for the registration of members and award of certificates in respect of the qualification acquired. And D, maintaining professional ethics. The bill provides for maintaining professional ethics through sanctions of erring members in order to maintain and ensure the observance of ethical standards and professional conduct among professionals of the banking and financial services professionals in the country. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, creating the Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services under an Act of Parliament will enable the Institute to operate under a legal framework with a structured governance system based on self-regulation. This will ensure compliance with best international practices within the banking and financial services sector. The bill, once enacted, will ensure professionalism in service delivery and allow the Institute to accredit its professional qualifications on the National Qualification Framework and have a pool of banking and financial service professionals that adheres to the industry ethics and code of conduct. Considering the critical intermediary role that the banking and financial services play in an economy, the Ministry supports the bill and is confident that its enactment will contribute to enhance integrity and stability of the banking and financial services industry and ultimately leads to a competitive and resilient financial sector that contributes to sustained economic growth. Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
Thank you. Any further debate? The chairman of the Planning and Budgeting Committee, the Honorable Member for Momba.
Madam Speaker, the Planning and Budgeting Committee was tasked to scrutinize the Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services Bill, National Assembly Bill number 22 of 2022, pursuant to its mandate as set out in the Standing Order number 195 of the National Assembly Standing Orders 2021. Before I delve into much detail, Madam Speaker, allow me to apprise this August House of a brief background of the Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services. The institute was registered as an autonomous training institute under the Societies Act, Chapter 119 of the laws of Zambia, 30 years ago in 1992. Over the years, the institute has been a key player in higher education as it offers training in banking and finance fields in collaboration with the higher education institutions. Regrettably, Madam Speaker, despite this important role, the training programs offered by the institute are not recognized and accredited by the Higher Education Authority because the institute does not meet the relevant requirements stipulated in the Higher Education Act number 4 of 2013. It is in this spirit and area that the Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services Bill is before this House to grant the institute the mandate to produce qualifications that will be recognized by the Higher Education Authority through the enactment of this Act. Madam Speaker, the House may wish to note that the committee comprehensively scrutinized the bill, and I therefore wish to place it on record that the bill was received with mixed reactions from stakeholders. Without any doubt, Madam Speaker, most stakeholders underscored the role of the institute in contributing to the attainment of higher education and its meaningful role in unlocking the growth potential and economic development of the country. However, they feared that some provisions of the bill would cause unwarranted duplication of the functions with those of key regulatory players such as the Bank of Zambia, Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Pensions and Insurance Authority. From the outset, Madam Speaker, I wish to categorically state that based on the submissions from stakeholders and the deliberation that ensued, the committee is not in favor of some of the salient provisions of the bill and therefore does not support it. It is my hope, Madam Speaker, that this August House has acquainted itself with the content of the committee's report, as I will only highlight a few of those observations. Madam, the committee is against the provision for the institute to regulate the conduct of professionals providing banking and core banking services proposed under Clause 4B of the bill. By nature, and in the context of the provided definition of practitioner and core banking services, the banking sector employs a pool of professionals, some of whom are already regulated by other professional bodies. Granted, Madam Speaker, that the exposure of the professionals put a risk on deposits from the public, the committee is convinced that there is sufficient legislative and regulatory scope that can manage financial crime in the banking and financial services sector. In light of this, the committee strongly recommends that, number one, the bill should recognize the role of key regulatory players, namely the Bank of Zambia, Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Pensions and Insurance Authority, and ensure that the institute complements their respective regulatory laws. Number two, the government should leverage on the mandate of already established statutory bodies and strengthen collaboration among institutions such as the Drug Enforcement Commission, Financial Intelligence Center, and the Anti-Corruption Commission. Number three, the Bank of Zambia should ensure that key industry players such as banks play an essential role in developing, enforcing, and maintaining higher professional standards for those who work in the banking and financial services. And lastly, Madam Speaker, number 4, the wide scope of definition of the term practitioner should be reviewed. Lastly, Madam Speaker, the committee is concerned about the growing trend in granting inspectors of professional bodies mandate and power to search premises. The committee reckons that the provisions clause 47 and 49 are outside the ambit of exceptions in Article 17(2) of the Constitution, which provides for derogation from the protected right to privacy. It is the recommendation of the committee that more appropriate ways of regulating professionals should be identified. Based on the stated reasons, Madam Speaker, the observations made by the committee as well are the numerous concerns raised by stakeholders. The committee reiterates that it does not support the bill. It is the sincere hope of the Planning and Budgeting Committee that the mover of the motion, that is the Minister of Finance and National Planning, will review the misgivings of the committee and those of the stakeholders, and to this end, consider to defer or withdraw the Banking and Financial Services Bill, National Assembly Bill number 22 of 2022. Madam Speaker, thank you.
Thank you. Any further debate? Just to bring to the notes of the House that we have a lot of work. And members, when you are debating, please let's bring out the points that have not been brought out. And also you need not use your, stop the clock first. You do not need to use your 8 minutes. If you can yield some time to another member, then we can have as many members as possible debating. The Honorable Leader of Opposition.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. As guided, I will speak very briefly. Madam Speaker, my take on this particular matter is that I'm persuaded by the arguments advanced in the report of the committee. The purpose of Parliament, Madam Speaker, is to provide an oversight role. And those committees, your committees, are very, very important to the extent that once you task them, to scrutinize and analyze these bills, they have occasion to interact with various stakeholders who come with different positions. And of course, looking at the expertise and experience of the committee, they later come up with a position. The position in this particular case, Madam Speaker, is that the committee does not support the bill. I therefore wish to agree with the committee and appeal to the sponsor of this bill, the mover, who is the Minister of Finance, to consider withdrawing the bill so that further consultations can be made, and that once the bill comes back to this House, it should be at a time that stakeholders would have agreed to ensure that we come up with a law that is functional. These laws, Madam Speaker, one of the functions of the law is to regulate conduct. In this particular case, it will be to regulate conduct within the banking sector. Now, given the arguments that stakeholders brought about, it will be a very, very difficult law to implement going forward if we decided to go ahead and enact this law. I submit, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Bwana Mkubwa.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just want to speak on one or two issues. Madam Speaker, the Banking and Financial Services Act is meant to guide the Bank of Zambia on who should be regulated as a bank or non-financial institution, and not on which member. So, Madam Speaker, my issue on this motion is to ensure that if you look at lawyers, you look at accountants, they're all regulated. And there is no way the bankers cannot be regulated. Madam Speaker, it's in this country that a course was introduced, Diploma in Banking, which is a Zambian tailor-made course on bankers. Eventually, CBU, Madam Speaker, went on also to introduce a degree in banking and finance to that effect. So it's important, Madam Speaker, even as we churn out these professionals from these courses, that the professional ethics and standards, it's important that they're regulated to that effect for them to provide the much needed service to this country. So therefore, Madam Speaker, I don't see the problem why the bankers should not be regulated to that effect. In essence, all these pieces of legislation which has been mentioned, the Securities and Exchange Commission Act, all these, the banking, they are not looking at individuals, Madam Speaker. It's important that we also look at individuals who are working for banks. You find a person has worked for this bank and they commit certain, or they have problems in that bank, they move to work to another bank. So it's important, just like us accountants, the lawyers, they're all regulated by certain institutions. So, Madam Speaker, from my own perspective, I do support that. I don't agree with the recommendations of the committee. I think it's important that our colleagues from the banking sector are also regulated to that effect, not only from where they're working from. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. There's an indication for a point of order. Honorable Member for Shuangandu, what's the point of order?
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I raise this point of order pursuant to Standing Orders 185, which basically refers to your committee minutes and reports, how they should be considered. And I'll just cite Standing Orders 185, 2 and 3. 2 states, and I quote, a minority report or an expression of opinion shall not be contained in or annexed to a report of a committee. 3, a member of a committee shall not dissent from or vote against the recommendation contained in the committee's report. Madam Speaker, you operate through your committees, and the work that you assign to the committees is deliberated upon, and the committees are allowed to interact with various stakeholders. And by standard procedure, when a committee is brought on the floor with a recommendation by the committee to withdraw or defer that particular work or a bill in this case, we have, because that's where the authority is deposited, Madam Speaker. Are we in order, Madam Speaker, to go against your report's recommendation, ignore the work that you assigned them to do, and continue debating this bill without hearing the position the Honorable Minister of Finance is going to take in view of the recommendations as given by the chairperson of your committee? I seek your serious guidance and indulgence on this matter. Thank you.
Maybe I'll need to consult first the clerks at the table. Thank you very much. The Standing Order 183, 2 and 3, which 185, 2 and 3, which the Honorable Member for Shuangando has referred to, is well noted. But this particular standing order does not stay or bar us from continuing with the debate. So what will happen is honorable members will give their views, and the minister, as he responds, at that time, after taking into consideration the views that have been expressed by the committee and the members of the House on the members of this House on the floor of this House, the minister then will respond and make a decision in his best judgment whether to withdraw or to defer the bill. So we'll leave that to the best judgment of the minister, taking into consideration what the honorable members are going to state. So we can make progress. I'll call upon the next honorable member for Pambasha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I support the recommendation of your committee, Madam Speaker, laws are meant to govern the people, and laws are not supposed to conflict each other. Listening from the chairperson, he cited about 5 registrations that if this law is passed, it is going to conflict with, and it will become very difficult for implementation and for management. It will be now, as I'm not trying to draw you into debate, Madam Speaker, as a renowned lawyer, you know that the court will have difficulties in case of litigation to interpret a law that is conflicting on 5 different pieces of registration. And further, Madam Speaker, I remember in 2013, because this House also works on precedents, the case of the appointment of Madam Lombechiwe Sakunda as Chief Justice of Zambia. When your committee recommended the withdrawal or deferment of that case was gladly, despite PF then having numbers, because that is a procedure, was withdrawn, and we did not proceed because the committee sits and deliberates on behalf of the Speaker and the stakeholders who will be regulated by this law. If they said, no, we don't support, and then we go ahead and pass this law, whom is it going to regulate? Because the people, the players in the sector are saying, no, this law is contradicting the financial intelligence, it is contradicting the drug enforcement, the Anti-Corruption Commission, the Banking and Financial Regulations Act, the Bank of Zambia, and the Pensions and Scheme Insurance. And then it will be another complication of I remember, Madam Speaker, in 2016, when we were passing the Zambian Constitution, Chapter 2 now, when my brother, now Minister of Local Government, who sat here and he said, Mr. Speaker, I've taken 2 shots, and we don't want to have the similar complications that after the Constitution is passed, it becomes the debate of the public trying to interpret what does this mean in relation to this act. And this is an act of parliament. Therefore, not to even consume the whole minutes that have been allocated to me, Madam Speaker. I fully support the report of the committee and the position taken by the committee, going by the precedents that this House has set before on the appointment of Justice Chiwe Sakunda as Chief Justice. When the committee rejected and recommended for the withdrawal, that motion was withdrawn. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The last debater will be the honorable member for Luena.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity given to the people of Luena to contribute on this very important matter on the floor of the House. Madam Speaker, the people of Luena will not speak for long, and they are noting 1 or 2 issues, but overall in agreement with the recommendations of your committee. Madam Speaker, the banking industry is an industry like the mining industry and not a profession. And therefore, the relevant pieces of legislation, in this case, we have a very comprehensive, the Banks and Financial Services Act, which deals with the appointment of senior staff in the banking sector, Madam Speaker. The process of appointing somebody as a CFO in a bank is a very long process, which is not dealt with in the same way if you were to appoint somebody in any other organization, no matter how big it is. And that's as a consequence of this Banking and Financial Services Act that is very comprehensive. So, Madam Speaker, I think much of the, or many of the issues that the Honorable Minister needs to take into account have already been highlighted in the report. But the challenge that the people of Luena would like to note is that the proposed act, the proposed bill, Madam Speaker, is seemingly overarching across issues to do with the bank management, which is already dealt with in the Banks and Financial Services Act, the appointment of senior staff, and even their conduct. Madam Speaker, maybe, just maybe, there is need to have a real look at this particular bill so that further consultations can be carried out, and then we can decide whether this sector requires a bill or maybe an arrangement similar to the Institute of Directors as it is now is still sufficient in terms of pieces of registration to handle and regulate the people who work in the banking industry, Madam Speaker. They are, many of them already being regulated by their respective professional bodies. Many accountants work in the banks, many lawyers work in the banks, Madam Speaker, and they belong to the respective professional bodies that regulate them. The one thing we probably don't want to do is to over-regulate the conduct of individuals, as that can become counterproductive, Madam Speaker. With those few words, we would like to submit as the people of Luena. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Minister, winding up debate.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. And I want to thank all the honorable members who have debated and expressed their views. And of course, to that, I must add also the chairman of the committee that examined this bill. Madam Speaker, the bill had well-intended intentions because of the fact that the people working in an industry that look after our money, we have to make sure that they adhere to certain ethics and standards. And this is what the bill was trying to achieve. Because if you don't do that in this very complicated world, the chances of people losing large amounts of money can be quite substantial. However, Madam Speaker, I've heard the views of the committee and also the members who have debated. And this government is not like one where the 2016 Constitution, the committee then clearly recommended that let's not proceed. Okay, the committee then for the 2016 Constitution said, let's not proceed. But the government of the day, using the arrogance of numbers, said we must proceed. And today there are so many issues, including the fact, Madam Speaker, that these honorable members like ourselves, we want to be back in the councils. But when we told them then, let's not proceed, they said no. And today, here we are. So, as a listening government that does not want to repeat the mistakes of those across the streets, we decided that we'll go back and make further consultations and present in the next session of Parliament. I'm told this is called deferment, so the intention is to come back to the next session after we made further consultation. Madam Speaker, I want to thank you.
Thank you. The bill is therefore deferred. Next order, withdrawn. The bill is therefore withdrawn. Sorry. Next order.
The Securities Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 23 of 2022, second reading.
The Honorable Minister of National Finance and National Planning.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Any debate? The Honorable Minister of Finance and National Planning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The introduction of the Securities Amendment Bill number 23 of 2022 in the National Assembly is intended to align the operations of the Securities Exchange Commission, SEC, with the risk-based framework introduced under the FIC Act and ensure that the Commission effectively and efficiently undertakes its supervisory mandate. The risk-based approach to anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, and counter-proliferation financing is necessary in protecting capital markets investors, regulating the activities of capital market operators, and ensuring the orderly growth, integrity, and development of the capital markets. Madam Speaker, Securities Amendment Bill number 23 of 2022 aims to achieve the following objectives. A, implement a risk-based approach in the supervision and the regulation of capital markets. B, revise the supervisory powers of the Commission. C, provide for the appointment of an auditor by a licensed person. D, revise the powers of the Capital Markets Tribunal. E, provide for the immunity of a member of the Capital Markets Tribunal and a member of staff of the Tribunal and a member of staff of the Commission. F, provide for the regulation of a private fund. J, provide for matters connected with or incidental to the foregoing. Madam Speaker, the rationale of the bill. The amendments to the Securities Act are consequential following the FIC Act's amendments. The proposed Securities Amendment Bill addresses and encompasses the vetting of a beneficial owners of capital market operators and the enhancement of enforcement powers to effectively deal with predicate offenses for money laundering, combating financing of terrorism, combating proliferation financing information, disclosure requirements that could be used to detect whether or not an entity has been involved in illegal activities, including money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation financing, among others. Therefore, the provisions that have been proposed for amendment are meant to facilitate the implementation of a risk-based supervisory framework for money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation financing in the securities sector. This will entail that the Commission, as a supervisory authority under FIC Act, is effective in discharging its functions and plays its role in the fight against money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation financing. Major policy changes or inclusion in the bill. Madam Speaker, the bill will provide for A, risk-based supervision in the capital markets. The risk-based supervision in the capital market is not provided for under the current Securities Act with regards to the vetting of beneficial owners of securities business. In addition, there is no provision for a risk-based supervisory approach for both anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, and counter-proliferation financing, and securities regulation. Adopting a risk-based provision is in line with international best practice and to ensure that resources are focused on areas that are most susceptible to money laundering and financing terrorism in the capital markets. Additionally, the Commission, as a supervisory authority under the FIC Act, will be more effective in discharging its functions in fighting money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation financing. B, immunity for capital market tribunal members. The bill also provides for the immunity of members of the capital markets tribunal and members of staff of the tribunal and members of staff of the commission in order for them to discharge their duties effectively. Madam Speaker, the Ministry is confident that the enactment of this bill will enable the Securities and Exchange Commission and other anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing supervisory authorities to effectively supervise and monitor the implementation of anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing obligations by reporting entities. Further, it will revise the supervisory powers of the Commission to implement an effective risk-based supervisory framework for the security sector in Zambia. Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
Thank you. Any further debate? The chairperson of the Planning and Budgeting Committee, the Honorable Member for Mumba.
Madam Speaker, the Planning and Budgeting Committee was tasked to scrutinize the Securities Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 23 of 2022, pursuant to its mandate as set out in the Standing Order number 195 of the National Assembly of Zambia Standing Orders 2021. Madam Speaker, let me indicate from the outset that while most of the stakeholders who made submissions on the bill supported it, they did so with a lot of reservations. In this regard, the committee is not in support of the proposed amendments. Madam Speaker, in spite of the foregoing, the committee takes cognizance that securities are important as they provide companies a chance to raise capital. In this regard, Madam Speaker, many businesses avoid taking out business loans and hence turn to securities as an option. Consequently, debt and equity securities are popular because of the benefits they provide. Madam Speaker, capital markets, which are the main platform on which securities are traded, require a sound and progressive legal framework which responds to changing trends. The committee is aware that amendment of the Securities Act number 41 of 2016 envisages to achieve this. However, the committee believes that some provisions of the Securities Amendment Bill number 23 of 2022 are not in the best interest of the market due to the numerous concerns raised by stakeholders. Madam Speaker, in view of the foregoing and considering that honorable members have had sight of the report, I will only highlight a few of the concerns. Madam Speaker, while commending the government for taking steps to amend the Securities Act so as to enable it to respond to the changing trends, the committee expresses grave concern that there was lack of wide consultation, especially among the market players. The committee recommends that the government should consider withdrawing or deferring the bill so as to allow for wider consultation with the main market players whom the bill will be directly impacting. Madam Speaker, the committee notes that one of the things that Clause 6 seeks to expand the supervisory functions of the Commission, the committee notes that the proposed Section 19B(2) provides that the Commission shall take supervisory action, which may include taking possession of a capital market. Madam Speaker, the committee observes that taking possession is not defined in the Act, and no clear timeframes for possession are provided. while the committee notes that taking possession of a business which is poorly performing to the detriment of customers in the financial market by a regulator, for instance, the Bank of Zambia, is a common practice. It is of the view that the Commission should focus on ensuring compliance with the set regulatory requirements as opposed to having unfettered powers to close a business or company. The committee therefore recommends that the Commission should create a process or terms of reference for transferring to one competitor as opposed to the other. This will create fairness and transparency around the process of transfer. Preferably, the entire proposal should be deleted as it does not encourage market growth and development. Madam Speaker, the committee observes that Clause 8 seeks to provide for approval of directors and the senior management appointed by clearing and settlement agencies. The committee is of the considered view that this requirement is not in tandem with the provisions of the Companies Act number 10 of 2017 and respective articles of association for the various capital market players. While the proposal is a necessary safeguard in combating money laundering and financial terrorism, subjecting the appointment of directors and the senior management to the Commission's approval will interfere with the day-to-day operations of the company. The committee, therefore, Madam Speaker, recommends that the Commission should provide the minimum qualifications for the directors and the senior management who should be appointed in terms of guidelines and not an arbitrary determination on fitness which may be subjective. Madam Speaker, the committee observes with concern the proposal under Clause 19 to provide immunity for members and staff of the tribunal. The proposed Section 195A provides for a number of sensitive matters which the tribunal would preside over. The committee is of the view that the provision may lead to the capital market tribunal and the staff to avoid taking responsibility of their actions. In this regard, Madam Speaker, the committee recommends that immunity should not be absolute and that the Commission should provide for procedures for lifting immunity. This will help to ensure that the Act is fair and that the members of staff can be held accountable for their actions. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, I wish to place on record the committee's gratitude to all stakeholders for their oral and written submissions on the bill. Further, the committee thanks your office and also the clerk of the National Assembly for the guidance and services rendered to the committee during the considerations of this bill. Lastly, Madam Speaker, the committee strongly urges the government to consider withdrawing or deferring the Securities Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 23 of 2022 for further public consultation. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you. Any further debate? The Leader of Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Chairperson, for that report. Madam Speaker, it's very clear that the committee report raised a number of concerns, and going by what the Minister did in the previous report, and in the name of objectivity and good order and consistency, the Minister was magnanimous to, first of all, project a good image of his government when it comes to listening. And I think even in this particular case, you will not find it difficult, to withdraw this bill. And as you've indicated, Madam Speaker, there's a lot of business to be transacted on the order paper. I therefore just wish to call upon the Minister of Finance to act consistently and withdraw this bill so that we can look at other business. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Mwembeji.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have to declare that I'm a member of the Planning and Budget Committee.
The Honorable Member, if you are a member of the committee, we want to give preference to the members who are not members to air their views, because you have discussed the issue sufficiently and you've been adequately represented by your chairperson. The Honorable Member for Nkana.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much. Very few remarks, and I want to agree with the leader of the opposition and, of course, commend the Minister of Finance for being magnanimous to accept the shortcomings. My own misgivings, or where I have a challenge, Madam Speaker, government does not operate in a void. And therefore, every other time that the ministry is coming up with a bill, this House is expecting that the technocrats at the ministry must have done sufficient consultations and not to allow the minister to, or rather not to allow for the embarrassment of the minister. Because clearly, when we waste so much resources on preparations of these bills, it should not lead us to having the minister come here to throw out or to defer or to completely do away with a bill where we would have wasted time, Parliament is wasting time, government entirely is wasting time. So I want to put it, Madam Speaker, that the minister perhaps needs to do a lot of work to censure his technocrats, to do a lot of work in consulting, because when we come up with these laws, they are not going to be operating in a void. There are a lot of stakeholders who should be engaged so that we don't become a laughingstock when we come and bring matters in this House. So I want to end by commending the minister that, yes, he's shown leadership by acknowledging that there's a shortcoming in these bills that have been presented. And I think that in agreeing to the leader of opposition, Parliament should not be made to waste time. So, Madam Speaker, I think this bill must be done away with. I thank you.
Thank you. There is an indication from the Honorable Member for Mwembeji for a point of order. What's the point of order?
The point of order, Madam Speaker, pursuant to our standing orders number 65. Madam Speaker, the law of Parliament is to do an oversight, checks and balances. When a bill comes here, it's not mandatory that that bill is going to pass through. And if it is withdrawn or deferred, it doesn't mean that we are wasting people's money or the minister is in an embarrassment. Is he in order? The honorable member who is supporting what the committee did, in order to say that the minister is being embarrassed when we are just doing our work together with the minister, is he in order, Madam Speaker? I see a serious ruling.
Order, honorable members. When a bill is brought to Parliament, of course, it's supposed to be processed. So it's a process. Either the bill will be allowed to go through, or it will be withdrawn or deferred. So there is no wasting of time. We are also doing our work. It's part of the process. So to the effect that the honorable member said we are wasting time and taxpayers' money, the honorable member was out of order. I think from the general debate, I think it will be safe at this time to call upon the Honorable Minister of Finance and National Planning to wind up debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill is not being withdrawn. It's not being withdrawn, Madam Speaker, because it's a very important bill. As we have heard, the most important aspect of this is that of fighting laundering of money. Madam Speaker, money is laundered in different ways. And one of those is through securities. A security is basically a share or a debenture or something like that. And these are instruments that have been used. These are instruments that have been used to finance, for money laundering. And therefore, the coming to, when we bring this bill here, we are doing so because it is part of what this country has already agreed to, that we are not going to tolerate money laundering or anything of that sort. So, Madam Speaker, in the spirit that it has been presented, I see no reason why it should be withdrawn. I heard people saying that there was not sufficient consultations. There were. And regulators were consulted. They agreed with this bill. Various regulators, they agreed with this bill. Market players were consulted and agreed with the bill. Ministry of Justice, I believe, they consulted stakeholders in 3 meetings. They agreed with the bill. So let's not make it into a habit just because one bill was withdrawn.
Point of procedure, Madam Speaker.
Just because one bill was withdrawn.
Order, Honorable Minister. There is a point of order. Leader for opposition, what's the point of order?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now that the ministers decided to proceed with the bill, I think it denies the other members an opportunity to debate on the contents of the bill so that his response is comprehensive. Ordinarily, Madam Speaker, we thought the minister was going to be consistent with the decision he made earlier by following what the recommendations of the committee was. But in this particular case, and as usual, he changed his position and took a different position altogether. So I therefore submit, Madam Speaker, that other members be allowed to debate so that it gives the minister an opportunity to respond comprehensively. I submit, Madam Speaker.
I was also of the view that what happened previously would happen. That's why I curtailed the debate. So since the bill is not being withdrawn, I think I'll need to allow some other members to debate, just a few members, and then the minister can respond, and then we can follow the processes. Sorry, we have to go back. The Honorable Member for Kawambwa.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to add a voice to this important bill. Madam Speaker, more often than not, we believe that overregulation is the way to go, not knowing that as you overregulate, you are stifling growth and you are actually disabling the capacity of your economy and the country to move forward. It is very unfortunate, Madam Speaker, that we have to debate this particular bill in this particular fashion. Madam Speaker, the committee's report, your committee's report, is very explicit. The Honorable Chairman of the committee has highlighted issues that needed to be taken back and to be deliberated upon before this bill can be brought back to this House. But unfortunately, the Honorable Minister had decided to take a very antagonistic position, as usual. Madam Speaker, that is very unfortunate. That is very unfortunate because as you have guided and as you've said very clearly that when your committee brings a report, that report is no longer a committee's report. It is your report. And all of us seated in this House, regardless, have got a solemn duty, Madam Speaker. All of us seated here have got a solemn duty to protect and defend your report. Madam Speaker, we call upon witnesses from various disciplines to come and help us interrogate the bills, the appointments, and all various kinds of assignments that Parliament would like them to help us with. And Madam Speaker, what message are we going to be sending to those honorable witnesses who come to help us interrogate such matters as bills, as appointments, if we do not deal with these particular issues and be able and be in your...
There is a point of order from the chairman of the committee. What's the point of order?
Madam Speaker, it is on this point of order according to our standing orders, number 65B. Madam Speaker, yes, I recognize that I'm the chairperson for this committee, Madam Speaker, is the Honorable Member of Parliament who is on the floor in order, Madam Speaker, to insinuate that our duty here as Parliament is not to go against the report. Whilst, Madam Speaker, in 2018, the Honorable Minister then of Finance, Honorable Margaret Manakarwe, brought a bill in this House which he was seeking to replace the sales tax, to bring in board the sales tax in case of the VAT. And Madam Speaker, the committee then recommended that the sales tax was not a good bill to bring in Parliament. And that report, Madam Speaker, is there here in Parliament. And Madam Speaker, we know that in 2018 PF was in power. My colleague there who is debating was a member of this House. And the sales tax, Madam Speaker, was brought to vote. And then the members, because they worked on the numbers, Madam Speaker, the sales tax went ahead. Now, Madam Speaker, is the member on the floor in order to contradict himself by indicating that whatever bill comes here must be supported according to the recommendations? Madam Speaker, I seek your serious ruling on this matter. Thank you.
Order, honorable members. I think what we need to do here is to debate. If there's a point that one honorable member wants to bring in order to rebut the point which another member has made, it's better to bring it through a debate, not through a point of order. May the honorable member for Kawambo proceed. But as we do that, let's be aware of time. I had requested that we don't repeat. You may proceed.
I thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we are always guided by your office through the chair that when we debate, we might need to be factual, and we're still dealing with VAT in this country, and the only reason we are still dealing with VAT is because the report that is being referred to about the sales tax was withdrawn.
Order, honorable members. Once I've made a ruling, let's not reopen the debate. Can you pay attention to the motion? Concentrate on the motion, honorable member.
Madam Speaker, I thank you, and I thank you very much. Madam Speaker, it's very unfortunate that we can have a chairman who would want to come and tell us to say, support me, let's support the Speaker, and on the other hand, he wants to cower out and hide under the chairs that, no, that's not what he meant. The report is very clear. There is no way, Madam Speaker, it's procedural, it's unacceptable that a chairman who can present a report here and asking us to support that report can stand up on a point of order and try to go back on his own report. It is unacceptable,
Order.
and that should not...
Order. Honorable member, I had already guided. Please concentrate on the motion. Concentrate on the motion. I've already ruled. And I had advised that members should bring out the issues, and if there's any rebuttals, they should be done through debate. So there is no need to go back to that issue again and to personally now start debating each other. No, that's not the way to proceed. You may proceed and wind up.
Madam Speaker, in winding up my very good debate, extremely good debate, I would want to urge the Honorable Minister of Finance, just as he had done earlier on, and he alluded to the fact that them as the New Dawn government, They are now copying from our good way of doing things, especially when it came to the Constitution. Madam Speaker, if you recall, when there was that constitutional debate in here, our colleagues from the UPND from this side, they rose. They almost broke the leopard and so on, because they said PF must not even change a comma. They must not even change anything in the draft constitution. So I totally agree that the chairman of the committee is on firm ground. He interacted with the committee, is on firm ground. They interacted with the stakeholders. They interacted with professionals, and those people they interacted with and institutions are on firm ground, saying there are some things in this particular bill which needs to be relooked at. We therefore appeal to the conscience of the Honorable Minister of Finance to say, we are with you, we are going to support you, as long as you bring back a refined document that can meet the aspirations of Zambians, so that you do not stifle development of the economy and the growth of Zambia in general. We are on firm ground and we are going to support. Madam Speaker, I support your committee's report and their recommendation. I thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Mongo Central.
Thank you very, very much, Madam Speaker. I want to place it on record that the people of Mongo Central want to support the minister's stand on this particular bill. It is the considered view of the people of Mongo Central that this issue was not properly and meticulously and methodically examined. As such, we want to ensure that the minister's stance is supported. The issues that the bill wants to raise are of critical importance. The issues of money laundering are very paramount and very important in this country and in the entire world. The most of the crimes that are being committed now is because of illegal money movements. And we must do whatever it takes as urgently as possible to curb this trend. When I drive around Lusaka, I see a lot of filling stations mushrooming all over. I begin to wonder where the money is coming from. This bill seeks to establish the movement of money. And it's very important that we can't delay this bill. It's very important that we curb illegal movement of money in this country. If you look around in the world, most of the crimes that are being committed is because of money laundering. We can't afford to go that route. Zambia has been a peaceful country, and we must maintain it and protect it. Therefore, the people of Mongo Central support the minister's stance, and we submit that we will support you, Minister, when we vote.
Thank you. One more debater, the Honorable Member for Shuangandu.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to make a few comments on the motion on the floor. Madam Speaker, I want to put it very clear that we are not in contest. This is the house of procedures. This is the house of rules. And I'm sure you are equally taken aback because I could see the spirit of your area ruling to call upon the minister to conclude the debate was in a view that the minister was being magnanimous, and we don't take that as being embarrassed, or it's as it should be, because this institution has to play its role. Madam Speaker, in the submission of your chairperson, he made a very one key submission that clause 8 of the proposed bill seeks to provide for approval of directors and the senior management appointed by clearing and settlement agencies. The committee was of a considered view that this requirement is not in tandem, and I want my colleagues to hear this very clearly, is not in tandem with the provisions of the Companies Act number 10 of 2017 and respective articles of association for the various capital market players. And here lies the problem. Our role as legislators must make sure that as we are legislating, we don't pass bills that are in conflict. That's our core role here. And this very important issue must not be ignored, Madam Speaker, because by allowing the bill to go with this observation, we are saying, let's allow the laws to be in conflict. Who are we putting challenges? The people that have got the responsibility to interpret these these laws, which is the judiciary. And what are they going to say? We are not playing our role. And we don't want to be part of and parcel of the legislature that will be passing laws that will be in conflict. Not drawing you, Madam Speaker, into this debate. You have been one of those that have been interpreting the laws. And you know how much you have pressed emphasis on the Parliament to ensure that laws that are passed are not in conflict. So this is a very key observation. And Minister, it won't take much to just make sure that you go and clean up and make sure that the laws are in tandem. It's not in doubt that you are saying it is necessary to safeguard and in combating money laundering and financing terrorism. Yes, my colleagues must know that even now, we have got institutions. The Financial Intelligence Center is one institution that is existing by an act of Parliament here for the same purpose, dealing with illicit funds, proliferation of funds and procurement of illicit weapons. The institutions that are already in place. We have under Ministry of Home Affairs Anti-Terrorism Center, which is working in collaboration with FIC to deal with these aspects of terrorism and money laundering. The Drug Enforcement Commission, Madam Speaker, has got a full-fledged unit, the anti-money laundering unit, under the drug enforcement. They are collaborating with
Sorry,
all.
Honorable Member, to interrupt you. There is an indication from the Honorable Member Fonkana for a point of order. What's the point of order?
It's actually point of procedure, Madam Speaker.
Order, Honorable Member. There is no provision in our standing orders for a point of procedure. It's either a point of order or nothing at all.
I want to place a point of order on the House, Madam Speaker. You will forgive me.
Sorry. What standing order are you using to raise a point of order on the House?
65, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Member, I think let's allow the Honorable Member for Shuangandu to debate. Let's not interrupt him. The Honorable Member for Shuangandu.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. So the point I'm trying to drive here is that these institutions that I've cited are already performing their role in ensuring that the money laundering and financing of terrorism are checked. So in asking the minister to defer this bill a bit, because the committee, again, is of a view that maybe consultations were not conclusive, were not exhaustive. There are still some key stakeholders who could have been left out. So we are not saying we don't support these measures that are being proposed. But like I've said, we have to make sure that as Parliament, we don't enact laws that will be in conflict. That's our number one objective. And so in requesting the minister to defer this bill, we are not saying we are closing the door. And we go with the spirit that you ruled upon earlier on, Madam Speaker, and the recommendations of your committee. We don't want minister to be because now you are going to put your members of this committee in a very difficult position, as provided for under the standing orders. Please, let's not proceed in that route. your members of the committee who would want to support you will be now in a predicament because they were assigned by the speaker and they've come with a position. So now we are telling them that, no, you as minister, you are going against their recommendations. What choice do they have? They will have to stay away. And we also don't want to take this bill to the voting. That's not our desire. Because the CAF said we are not in contest. So, Minister, it's not too late. You can still reconsider your position and make sure that we are in harmony as a house. We don't want to be at conflict. You just imagine of your members of committee who are now going to be gagged because you want to proceed. In the meantime, they have made recommendations which they can't go against themselves. Because this is actually our standing orders dictates. Standing orders 185 is very clear on how the committees handle these reports. So, Madam Speaker, my final submission to the minister is that it's not a sign of weakness, it's not an embarrassment, but you are giving this institution to perform its legislative functions effectively without going into antagonism which might be unnecessary. Madam Speaker, I submit.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Zambezi East, we want to raise a point of order. What's the point of order?
Yes, Madam Speaker. I just want to clarify from you as chair, Madam Speaker. Standing order number 65 requires us to be factual in our debate. I realize that the honorable member for Shuangando, who is a good friend of mine and a colleague in the same committee, seems to suggest that us who are members of the Planning and Budgeting Committee cannot vote in a certain manner against this bill. What I seem to see here is that we are, if this went up to a vote, it would mean deciding on the bill.
The Honorable Member for Zambezi East, raise your point of order, then you
Yes.
will make a ruling.
Madam Speaker, is the honorable member for Shuangando in order to seem to suggest that members of the Planning and Budgeting Committee cannot go against this bill? I seek your serious ruling.
Thank you very much, honorable members. The issue of standing orders still remains a challenge for a lot of us. We should be taking time to go through our standing orders. Honorable member for Zambezi East, Standing Order 185-4 provides, and I quote, the Speaker may refer the matter of a member who dissents from or votes against a report under paragraph 3 to the Committee on Privileges and Absences or take an appropriate action against such member. So the honorable member for Zambezi East, once a committee makes a stand or a recommendation, no member of that committee can dissent or vote against that. Sorry. Let me get guide. Sorry, just a moment. Let me get guide. Let me consult. Even me, I still have some time to learn the standing orders. Unfortunately, as Standing Order 184 refers to sessional reports by committees. When a committee is made and laid on the table, and the House debates. At the end of the debate, there is a question that is put whether the report should be adopted or not adopted. It's at that stage, that the members of that committee cannot vote against that report, the adoption of that report, or dissenting against the report. But for this one, the question is different. We are discussing a bill. The committee was assigned to go and look at the bill and talk to stakeholders. And then when they come here, they don't table the report, but rather the report is presented by the chair from where he's sitting. So when we are voting, the question is not whether the report should be adopted or not, but we are voting on whether the bill should proceed to the next reading. So what we are doing here, we are voting on whether the bill should proceed to the next reading. So the honorable members of that committee are free to vote with their conscience. So honorable member for Shuangandu, what's the position?
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we seem to be having a very big challenge. Madam Speaker, your area guidance, unless there is any standing orders which is speaking to that proposition. Let me read, Madam Speaker, 185, which is very clear. 185, Madam Speaker, 2.
The only problem that we are having here...
Madam Speaker, so that we are on the same page.
Order, honorable member for Shuangandu, order. The issue there is that you raise a point, I've ruled, and now we can't open the same debate. The practice of the House, and it has been done previously, the practice is that on bills, members of the committee can vote with their conscience whether to appoint or not. Unless if you can see, you show me a standing order which says that members of the committee cannot vote. And I've made a ruling already. I've already made a ruling. Let's just proceed. Let's make progress. No, but honorable member, I know I appreciate your help, but I've already made a ruling. I've already made a ruling. Let's just proceed. Can we have some order? We have been guided by the technocrats. We have been guided. Order. Order. Order, honorable members. Order. Order.
No, that's not correct.
Order, honorable members. Huh? Once you are guided, you've been guided.
No.
Let's make progress.
You are being unruly.
The Honorable Minister of Finance winding up debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. In winding up, I want to present two sets of arguments. The first set is what seems to be coming from my colleagues over there. They are saying that once a committee recommends this way, then you are obliged to follow that. And the answer, Madam Speaker, it is no. Because we already gave the example of how we gave...
Order, honorable members. Order. Can we have some order? Order.
Madam Speaker, I'm saying this because I'm responding to what some of them were saying there. I'm responding to what some of them were saying which was that the committee has already recommended like this.
Maybe, Honorable Minister, sorry to cut you, so that we avoid unnecessary debate on that issue. Since I've already made a ruling, just respond to the issues that were raised by the Honorable
Thank you,
members.
Madam Speaker.
And then we make progress.
Well noted. There were a number of comments that came through. There was one saying we are over-regulating. We are not over-regulating. Madam Speaker, the issue here is about how to make provisions to fight money laundering using securities. That is all. That is the key point. So how does that become over-regulating? All of us know that money laundering takes place in different formats. Some launder through, for example, filling stations. Some launder through houses. Some launder through securities. So in the light of the fact that we need to fight money laundering, the key element of this bill is just to make sure that securities are not used for money laundering. That is all. That is the very essence. And this is why I felt that it is not necessary, it's not even desirable, that this bill must be withdrawn. Madam Speaker, there was issue about approval of directors. Madam Speaker, there is absolutely nothing strange about this. Because in financial institutions, this is something that happens all the time. As we speak right now, Madam Speaker, under the Banking and Financial Services Act, compliant with the Bank of Zambia, directors of institutions must be approved by the Bank of Zambia, a regulator. Okay? Directors are approved by the Bank of Zambia, which is a regulator. So what's the difference here? If this particular regulator says, in order for us to fight money laundering and supervise it properly, we must approve directors in line with what Bank of Zambia does. What is wrong with that? It is entirely in line. And I don't see why we should create issues out of that. Madam Speaker, I also want to tell you that the former Minister of Home Affairs is right, Honorable Kampiong. We belong to an institution called a SAMLAG. A SAMLAG is a regional institution that is tasked with fighting money laundering in the region. In the same vein, a SAMLAG is a member of a global family of members of fighting money laundering. Every year, the global body makes an assessment of countries to say where are the risks of money laundering in your country. And, Madam Speaker, those countries that fail to comply in making provisions to fight money laundering, they are given a stamp of disapproval. You become a pariah nation where money laundering is not taken seriously. And in the past few years, this global body told this country, your laws for fighting money laundering are not adequate. They are not adequate. Deal with these issues because you are exposed on the issue of securities. Securities in Zambia are a risk. That's what they told us. If you don't deal with this issue, it means you'll be among the countries of the earth that are not compliant fully with the strategies to fight money laundering. So, in enacting this, or in pushing forward this bill, we are merely also responding to the criticism that was put on this country that our strategies for fighting money laundering are not adequate. So what is the problem, colleagues? What is the problem? Now, you also talked about takeover of institutions. Yes, there's a provision here for takeover of institutions. But in fact, the takeover of the institutions is not something that is in this amendment bill, because we are talking about an amendment bill here. In the parent bill, these provisions for taking over financial institutions that are not doing well, those provisions are already there. So once again, I'm surprised to hear that this matter is causing concern. My final, but final, institutions that were consulted, because they will say that we have not consulted enough. Bank of Zambia was consulted, FIC was consulted, Ministry of Finance was consulted, Law Association of Zambia was consulted, Zambia National Building Society, ZRA was consulted, Zika was consulted, PIO is consulted. So how do you say that there was no consultations? How do you say so? Finally, Madam Speaker, indeed, there may be issues. Okay? There may be issues. I don't deny that, and I take the report of the committee. Now, this is not the first time in this country that a bill has issues. It's not the first time. So the issue is, how do we deal with those issues that are in the bill? There are two approaches. One approach is, if we sit down together, you bring out those issues, we can make an amendment. Okay? We can make an amendment. Another situation is when there are so many issues. So many issues. And of course, we may now say, with so many issues, we are rising mid-December or thereabout, there may not be sufficient time to deal with these numerous issues. What do you do? Under those circumstances, you take the route that I took in the first bill, because then you have enough time to deal with those several issues. But for now, I've not heard of so many issues. I've heard of issues, some of which I've responded to,